Chapter 14. Tiffany. Tiffany pushed the food around on her plate. It had been 4 days since she'd broken up with Israel, and the misery she felt didn't seem to be lessening. She'd thought when she broke up with him that at least she would feel relief. Relief that she wasn't ruining his life or his chance at the family he wanted, but all she felt was sadness and guilt. "Okay, what is going on with you?" Holly asked, setting her fork down and folding her hands under her chin. Holly had been working late the last few nights, so they hadn't had much time to talk, but she'd convinced Tiffany to have dinner with her at the restaurant tonight. Tiffany hadn't really wanted to, preferring the misery of her lonely room and bland food, but Holly had insisted. "I broke up with Israel." "You did what?" Holly's face was a portrait of incredulity. Eyes wide, mouth open, shocked expression. "I broke up with him." Tiffany hoped the more she said the words, the easier they would become, but so far that wasn't the case. Inside, she was just as shocked at herself as Holly was. Why was she throwing away a good thing just because of a diagnosis? She twirled a noodle with her fork, keeping her eyes locked on her plate. Normally, everything Holly brought out was amazing, but she'd barely tasted anything the last few bites. In fact, she'd tasted so little she had no idea what she was even eating. "But why? I thought you were okay Friday after we talked." Holly grabbed her glass and took a sip of her water. Tiffany swallowed the lump that was building in her throat. "We were, but I took your advice and went to the doctor on Saturday." She glanced up at Holly. "Okay, so what?" Tiffany chewed on the inside of her lip. Could she say the words out loud? They would certainly feel more final if she did. But who was she kidding? They were final. "She said I have endometriosis and a bad enough case that I may never have children." Holly's face folded in compassion. "Oh, Tiffany, I'm so sorry. But that's not why you broke up with him, is it?" "Of course it is." Tiffany grabbed her own water glass, but instead of drinking it, she turned it in circles on the table. How could Holly not understand this? "But why?" Holly pressed. "Because I'm broken. I can't have kids, Holly. I can't have a family." Holly reached across the table and grabbed Tiffany's hand. "Now, you listen to me." Her voice had taken on an authoritative tone, the kind Tiffany was sure her employees had heard, but one she never had. "You are not broken just because you may not be able to have kids. It doesn't make you any less of a woman, and it doesn't mean you can't have a family." Tears pressed against Tiffany's eyes. "But he wants a big family, and I can't give him one. He'd never be happy." Holly shook her head, but her tone was softer when she spoke again. "Have you asked him?" Tiffany squirmed and shifted her gaze to her lap. "Well, no, but we talked about kids before, and I know he wants a house full." Holly sighed. "Okay, but did he ever say the only way to do that was through natural childbirth? Or is it possible that he might be okay with filling that house through an alternative way? There are other ways to have a big family, you know." She began to check them off on her fingers. "There's adoption, there's fostering, there's fertility treatments. If he loves you like I think he does, then where that family comes from is less important than who he creates it with." Could Holly be right? Tiffany had been so sore with emotion and upset that her dreams could never come true that she'd naturally concluded no one else would want her. But could she be wrong? Israel had never said he would only want a large family naturally, and she did know other people who found joy in adoption. She lifted her glass for a sip and sighed. "Maybe you're right. But it doesn't matter now. I turned down his invitation to the dance and said we shouldn't see each other again. I've been avoiding him for the last 4 days. If I try to go back now, he'll just think I'm crazy." "Well, you were a little crazy, but it's understandable," Holly said with a kind smile. "Look, your world was thrown upside down. It's hard knowing it won't turn out exactly the way you planned, but Israel seems like a kind and understanding man. I'm sure if you explain the situation, he'll be open to trying again. If not, you can always claim hormones made you do it. That's worked for decades." "Stop." Tiffany rolled her eyes. "I'm not going to lie to him, but I will consider talking to him and explaining." "You should." Holly took a bite of her food, pausing long enough to chew and swallow before pointing her fork at Tiffany and continuing. "Girl, he's the best thing that's happened to you in ages. You've been nothing but smiles the last few weeks. Don't let this news ruin that. Let him show you he'll be beside you through the good and the bad." Tiffany thought about that as she chewed on her own forkful of food. Maybe Holly was right. She certainly had felt happier in the last few weeks, and she knew Israel was a big part of that. Plus, she hadn't given him the chance to decide for himself. Maybe he would be okay with cutting his losses and running. But maybe, just maybe, he'd be okay with adoption or fostering as an option. "Okay, I'll talk to him first thing in the morning." "I'm not sure I'd wait that long, but you do you," Holly said with a small smile. Tiffany shook her head. It was already evening. Israel was off work and at home. What could possibly go wrong before she had a chance to talk to him in the morning?